Thanks, Jason. Very excited to have Neil up. Hi, Neil. How are you doing?
Very good. Yourself? Hi, Alex.
Pretty good. Are you joining us from Oakville today?
That's right.
Yeah, so I'm super excited to basically go through your journey as a founder and learn a bit about the growth of Geotab and the challenges you faced and how you've approached some stuff. So let's start way back in the beginning. What was you consider your first entrepreneurial venture?
So the first entrepreneurial venture for me really began, I guess, back at school. I wrote for an electronics magazine. In the early days, all computer software was distributed in magazines. And me and my buddy got together. I had to write all the code. He made all the money. And and wrote this little on a ZX Spectrum book where you had to type out all the code. You basically printed it out. But I learned a couple of valuable lessons there. I love him. He's a friend of mine today, but he was smart. And I think he got he got the equivalent of $80 and I got 20. And I kind of figured out there, hold on, this is what being an entrepreneur is about.
So it sounds like you had a quick lesson there. And then if I'm right, you shortly started after a company called Vercom.
That's right. So when I finished university, I had a bursary, worked off the bursary, and then decided, to get into business by myself. Now, interesting thing, the reason actually I became an entrepreneur, I'm the most conservative person in the world, but there's three brothers that were born in 3 years. And it's actually quite a thing. When we were young, everything was a competition. Who could eat the hot dogs the fastest? Who could bat the fastest, run the fastest? And so my mom always said, Neil, you may be the smart one. You've done well at school and math and whatever, but your brother, he's the real entrepreneur. He's gonna own a business one day. And it was always stuck in my head. And, mom doesn't even remember saying it today. And it's funny how those little things in life push you to do these kind of strange things.
So I have to ask, is your brother an entrepreneur?
You know what? He actually works for me now. So yay, I won.
And it sounds like he's the older brother too.
He's actually not. He's a little younger than me. But the three of us were so close. It was very, interesting.
And all of you in Canada right now?
We are. We actually made a pact when we left South Africa. We had a barbecue and I said, listen, me and my wife want to get married and, we want to find a place to move to. And we all made a pact that we would move to the same country. So we explored all the countries of the world, English-speaking countries, and eventually chose Canada as the best place in the world to immigrate to. And we all immigrated together. So
it's a bit off course, but I'd love to hear why Canada. Like, what attracted you?
You know what? I'm typical nerd, right? I mean, I went and studied this to the nth degree. So I got United Nations research data. I spoke to people who had left South Africa and come back from the countries. I visited all the countries. So we all went. We went to, except for New Zealand, we went to Australia, UK, States. And, on en masse. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the one thing that did it for me, I have to be honest here, is we were on a Kentucky tour. And it was my first time I'd flown overseas. I was 23 and landed in San Francisco, ended up in Hawaii. And the bus was full with people from all over the world. So literally South Africans, Americans, a whole bunch of them. And there were 2 Canadians on the bus. And I had to say the nicest people, oh, can I help you? Your luggage looks heavy. Hey, buddy, how's it going? Just wonderful. And I just decided then if I was going to have kids, this is the place that I'd want to bring up my kids.
Well, I love to hear that, and I'd love to talk to those ambassadors one day and thank them for bringing an entrepreneur that's creating lots of business and lots of employment opportunities for Canadians. Going back to Vercom. So you started off, I think it was sort of a consulting firm. Can you tell us a bit about that experience? You started, I think, 1994. South Africa was in a special place at that point.
That's right. I mean, so we really started, leaving and not, spoken to some friends who were doing some work and said, listen, we'll do some contracting work for you. And I remember at the time we were thrown into some deep ends going, do you know how to write macros in Microsoft Word? Or, do you know how to write SQL? And we were suddenly we would go, we've had some experience there, but we can do it. And literally had never seen it. Ran home quickly, did all the studying that we had to do, scrambled, and figured out some interesting things. So, it was interesting for us. We started really the 2 of us doing this kind of Microsoft consulting, and then, employed one person. I remember doing some work for the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission. It's actually quite a story. We were helping write the SQL Server stored procedure that was going to aggregate all the media results for the first free and independent election in South Africa when Nelson Mandela was elected. And anyway, I must tell you that there was a very nasty bug that ended up being written into the code by me, in fact. And there was a whole story about how that ended up. But yeah, I mean, that's really the birthplace of us. And it ended up being about 120 people when we sold it in 2000. And that was really when we had made the decision to immigrate to Canada. And then, lived in the UK for a year as part of that part of the earn-out, and then ended up in Canada.
So did you sell purposely to free yourself up to immigrate?
Yes. So that was and look, it was a bit of luck. You know how it is in life. Like there's a lot of serendipitous, so there was the height of the IT bubble. We'd grown the company, to, $40 million in, a couple of years. So it really ramped up pretty quickly. We're the largest, development shop in South Africa at the time. We were doing all Microsoft support for them at that particular point. But yeah, the idea was then leave, and then coming to Canada was the next leg of the journey. And then there was a fork in the road, really, where I wanted to go and, my passion is artificial intelligence research. So I was going to go and study their masters at MIT in artificial intelligence. And right then our kid came, Ethan, and I wanted to move to Boston with Tammy. And she said, listen, my folks are here and we got a new kid along the way. Sorry, you got to stay here. And so plan B was to start this kind of telematics company. And again, forks in the road. You wonder how things would have worked out differently. I mean, machine learning today, that's going to be way bigger than telematics, right?
Well, and machine learning, Toronto's not a bad place to be learning it or be surrounded by it.
Absolutely. It's a real hotspot.
And so you knew you were going to come to Canada, or you're planning on it. When did the idea for Geotabs come? How did you get inspired to start something in the telematics space?
It also goes back to kind of family. My mom worked in South Africa for a company called Sanji Electronics that made aftermarket alarms. And I think it was around the time when Bill Clinton signed the bill that said, we are going to enable, was maybe a bit after, GPS to be free now to be used by civilians. And we all knew that was profound. We all knew there was something very significant in that. Now, it was not only just locked for the military. And sitting with Larry, the CEO, having a beer, he used to bribe me on a Friday, giving me beers, and I had to fix his computer for him, I remember. And we were talking about this all. And really, it's always that thing in life where you gotta have a business need, or you gotta have something unique from a technology perspective that's changed. And it's really being able to put those two together. And I remember Larry had found this, okay, GPS is now going to be available. And so now you've got this new ground-changing thing that's happening. But on the other hand, like, what is the need? And he was talking about, why don't we track people? And then you go, it's not practical, like batteries and electronics. So it's finding the practical use for the technology. And that's really kind of what kickstarted Geotab. We started it there in South Africa, this little side company, part of Vercom. We wrote the software, he did the hardware. And then when I came to North America, it was, well, let's see if the North Americans, I'm sure they're doing much better than Geotab is doing in South Africa, but let's see, let's do a little bit of research. And that's really where we started.
So that was 2000. And for people that are not familiar with what Geotab is or has become, can you give us like the 30-second overview?
Sure. So Geotab is the largest telematics company in the world now, as recognized by ABI Research, leading. We have 2.4 million vehicles that are connected through Geotab's telematics systems. And telematics it's about managing fleets. Really, anybody who has a fleet needs to have telematics.
And so, that was about 20 years ago. I think it took you about 18 years to come to the first million subscribers. Is that right? And now you're at, you said 2.4 million. So there's been hyper growth. I'd love to hear a bit about that journey and what you've learned. So, first question is, as the CEO, how has your role changed? How have you had to develop your skill set to be the leader of the company?
That's the biggest thing. Like, you always hear the story about the people that are good to take your company from kind of 1 to 10 and then 10 to 100 and 100 to 1,000. You have to change your skill set completely. So one of the hardest things for me to do is to actually figure out how my role changed. Now, I'm a closet software developer. I develop software. I still work on the systems today. And I know as the CEO of the company that is a very bad thing. I should not be doing that, right? My time is best spent on kind of business issues, but it keeps me in touch with the technology. It allows me to make really in-depth decisions. I actually read an article, Forbes magazine or somewhere, where they were talking about how, software developers can actually make good CEOs. And I always considered myself a very, very reluctant CEO. But in some sense, being a CEO is a problem-solving exercise. So, every single step of the way, the problems become different. Either you're writing the code and you're figuring out how to migrate from Access to SQL Server or change your platform or, do this new web thing, and then later on the problems become different. Like they become, how do we manage people? How do we, make sure that we're following the right strategies, and where are you seeing gaps in the company, and how do you organize things properly? And it's a very, very different role, but one that, if you accept that as a challenge and you're prepared to accept change, that you can actually do well.
And so it sounds like you're very analytical, and you've gone, I guess you don't make bugs in the code anymore, I hope. And so how would you describe your current leadership style?
We are very much a family business, and it started really as a way for the rest of the family to get into the country, to be honest. So we started working out of the basement. And so the values we have at the company are unique, and they're unique because of that curve that you talked about. But in the beginning, we had a choice. I remember, I think I put $500,000 into the company at the beginning. And I remember even talking to the guys. There were 3 of us in the company at the time, my 2 brothers and our VP of sales. And I said, listen, how much more am I going to have to spend before, we really turn this around and we see things going? And needless to say, we had got UPS as a big customer at that point, and things were really, on the up and up. But my mistake, if you like, was to think about success in terms of profit per person, not in terms of profit. So I said, our metric is going to be take the total profit you make divided by the number of people, so that you can't add more people. You're not allowed to add people. So outsource everything. And in a way, that was a good thing because it got us to focus on the most strategic elements. But it meant that we held the company back for such a long period of time because we didn't go and open the growth. But that also meant that we never took on any outside financing. Everything was bootstrapped, 100% within the company, which means today the owners of Geotab are the people that work at Geotab. There's not a single owner outside the company. I own 70% and the brothers own 9 each. And then there's probably another 150, 200 shareholders. But it's like a wonderful spirit. Like everybody cares about the bigger picture, the long term. Nobody's in it for the quick buck. And it does create a very unique culture.
Wow, there's a lot I can dissect there and many different ways I can take this. So I'm probably going to come back to this, what you just said, in a few different ways. First, I have to touch on it. Like, was it a conscious decision not to raise outside funding? How did you end up at that spot?
It was an interesting point. I always had more money to put into the business if we needed it. And my goal wasn't to grow the business as quickly as possible to make money in the short term. The goal was to find something that was sustainable for the long run. And that's why the decision was made to focus on the most important engineering aspects, the heart and soul of the software, outsource sales and marketing, outsource our office space, outsource our manufacturing, and really just stick to that niche. It didn't require a lot of money because, if it's really just, the core of you and you own the business, you don't have to pay each other a lot of money and you can really be successful. I think in hindsight, I would say that we probably made the right decision because taking on that outside capital would have changed the culture quite drastically. And I feel like even though those early days were slow, they established such a concrete base that we still rely on today that allowed us to accelerate. In fact, the ecosystem that we have is probably the strongest point that Geotab has. And that was only because we said we are not doing sales and marketing. And we could have sold it better than they could have in the early days. We could have made more money, but we chose not to do that, to keep that model that we wanted intact. And the interesting point was that it's created today one of the biggest strengths, 500 partners that care about your product, that offer consulting and sales services and integration. And that really is the value behind a platform, is having that ecosystem. And that takes time to build up.
And let's talk about that ecosystem, because I've noticed you take an open platform and you talk a lot about an ecosystem when you're out there doing interviews. So what is the approach there? Is it to replace sales and marketing? Why have you gone about this way?
Yeah. So, it's a commonly overused phrase, open, right? And really what we're talking about is that strong ecosystem. The fact that we in the early days said we choose to make less money and we choose to plow it into the long run. We choose to say that it's going to be about other companies being successful on top of our platform. If they're not making money, we're not going to make money. And so in order to do that, you have to follow all the paradigms of open. You have to make sure you have open API. The same APIs we use in our product are available to partners, and you document them well and you make them available. And we create a marketplace. And you've also got to be strong. You got to be iron, because even our competitors are on our marketplace. And you got to go that's okay. Like, that's part of the principle here. And you stick to your guns on this whole thing. And then I think the dividends pay off in the long run as that ecosystem kind of built out.
Interesting. And so the ecosystem is built out, but in 2019, you launched Torque Labs, which looks like it's an ability to help get more companies involved in the ecosystem. So what's the idea behind Torque Labs? Why did you launch it?
So again, a long-term perspective. What we said is that, we're a highly profitable company, and as part of a fun thing, we get all these opportunities coming to us all the time. We're set at Geotab, and companies will come to us, partners or customers or people that we know, and they say, I've got this brilliant idea for a product. And at various stages of completion. So some of them may be, prototype stage already. Some of them might be, early business sales happening. Some of them might even be even earlier than that. And so we said, what have we got that's unique? Well, we've got capital because we've got lots of money. We've got legal, we've got engineering, and we have access to 44,000 customers who are using telematics today that are really an interesting base on which an opportunity to look at. And so we said, let's try and enable the ecosystem by supporting these companies with one of those things. Pick which ones you want, and then we will enable them. And the idea is that we fund the company, and then as soon as they're ready to kind of spread their wings, then, we sell, they take the company, they go and sell out to somebody or big company or whatever, and it's working really well.
So what does success look like for Torque Labs?
Really, it is just having a constant stream of incubated, successful companies come through where we can add a little bit to help them along their way, as I said, in terms of capital or, just some insight. Sometimes you just need that person to sit down and go, listen, you have done it. You have taken a business that was sitting in a basement. You figured out how to create an ecosystem. You figured out how to scale it and run that business up to the largest telematics company in the world. What are the lessons along the way? What are the mistakes made? What can I learn from it? It's not to say that we know all the answers, but just having that sounding board and having somebody to ask does always help.
It's fascinating. One thing you also mentioned there, and we didn't get into, I'd love to hear about your approach to culture. Sounds like you've run lean, but you talked about the company being a family. And I think I've seen you have 4 values. How does this play out? How long have you had these values? Maybe you can talk a bit about that.
You know what? It wasn't ever written down in the early days. It was just, a principle that we all follow. The first thing is, for any of you who work with family, you'll probably quickly realize that, first thing you do is take ego off the table and put it away. And if you can work with family, you actually need to establish a good set of culture. So if everybody cares about the bigger picture and the greater good, if you put your egos aside and you care about the long term, you will always make it work. So we kind of started with that basis, and then the family values that come into it, like that deep sense of caring, right? I mean, we know that caring and having that great work environment does contribute to having staff stay longer than they would normally in most companies. And that's one of the things that I really pride ourselves on, is the very low churn that we have at Geotab. So and many employees who leave and come back. And I think the value behind that is important. And it really comes to the things that we all know and understand. Like, we care about, certain things like diversity, fantastically important to us, right? We have, we are in Canada, and you walk around, the floors of Geotab, and it is the United Nations, and you're dealing with some of the most incredibly smart people from all over the world, and that diversity, women, females, LGBTQ, people from all over the world, and it just creates strength. And I tell this one story where I remember working in the development department when it was really small, and we hired our first, women engineer, and I remember that she sat down between 2 engineers, one on each side. And I remember talking to her afterwards, and she said, Neil, and we were all laughing about it around the table. She said, it actually took a woman to come in and realize that these 2 gentlemen were working on exactly the same problem and had been working on it for 2 months. But it's like not talking to each other. And it takes Valerie to come in and go, guys, what's happening? Let's communicate. And it's just that diversity and approach differences and whatever is just so powerful. So I think those are some of the values that I think are really important to Geotab.
And you talk about values and culture. The other thing I noticed is a long-term thinking about the just world problems. And you've seen to put a focus on sustainability in the last year. So, how are you helping solve sustainability? Why are you driving this through Geotab versus activities outside?
Yeah, you know what? Geotab has actually been about sustainability right from the beginning. I think, I drove the first models of Prius when they were available, the first Chevy Volt, and then the first Tesla that came out. And so we've always been that centric. And our product itself, right? It's about reducing idling, optimizing routing, improving the performance of vehicles, managing your vehicles properly. So it's always been about reducing CO2 emissions. One of the things that came along and we realized was that we could actually lead the way here. We purchased a company called Fleet Comma based out of Waterloo, a wonderful company. Matt and Chris ran, huge company, 40 people. They were world leading in terms of EV telematics. We purchased the company. We were already doing our own EV telematics, but we integrated all their better technology in, and we transformed the company. And today, it is one of our key tenets. Like, we are the best company in the world in terms of helping companies start that path to sustainability, because we have a program that can literally go in and say, you put the device in, we'll tell you which vehicles are the best vehicles to change to EVs, because some of them are not. Don't touch the ones that you shouldn't, touch the ones that you should, and then we help them run their fleets. And that just makes us very, very proud that we can actually do a little bit to help that kind of journey on the sustainability side.
So I love that you're saying here's where an EV car will work and here's where it won't. So it takes a lot of, I guess, what's it called, range anxiety out.
Yes, and makes it practical, right? I mean, because we're dealing in a very practical world where, I don't know if you ever saw the story about, I think it was LAPD, where they purchased 40, was it i3s, and not a single one of them was driven in a year, or a few were, because they were never charged and everybody was paranoid about range, right? So it's really making sure you have the right vehicle for the right job and that it's set up properly, that you know it's charged, you know how far it can go. And so we just take that pain out of it, and we make sure that we're making it easy for customers to do that migration. So a very, very large delivery fleet that we all know that we purchase online from, we helped transform their ICE fleet in Europe over to EVs, right? And we help them manage that EV fleet for them.
That's awesome. A couple more questions. I want to get to the lightning round with quick questions. I normally ask what you see your vision for 10 years from now, but you've already been around 20. You seem to be making a large impact. So if you were to look out, let's go 30 years, or, what is Geotab and what impact have you had on the world?
We save 100 lives a year. We reduce CO2 emissions. We make companies more profitable. We have huge spin-off, and, we're a $400 million revenue company. So, just those general things, make me feel tremendously good. I think one of the things that we're doing and we're pioneering really well is this idea of truth in data. And everything that we do is science-based. It's a feedback loop. It's, all that engineering heritage. And that really is important to me. You make lots of decisions are made in life based on gut feel. And I think that the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years really is around the refining of data. I mean, today we see in social media so many problems around misinformation, right? It's the stuff that's fringe and it's, that ends up getting everybody's attention, and, anti-vaxxing or this or that creates all these problems. And I'm passionate about making sure I know that if people have the right information, if they realize there's only 3 people in the world saying that and there's 50 saying that's really the huge change that we can make. And it applies not just to social. I mean, it's everything in business too. Like, the more information we have, the more access to information, the more machine learning we can do on that information, and the more valuable we make it, the better the world will be.
That's awesome. I love that answer. Got one question from our audience. Actually, Jason asked a question. If you could do it again, would you focus on profit per employee, or would you try to grow faster sooner?
That is a good question. And I would say that our focusing on profit per person in the beginning was vitally important, because it made sure we focused. One of the biggest problems people make when you start a business is somebody says, well, I'll pay you money to do that. And then you go over here. And then somebody says, I'll pay you money to do that. So if focusing on profit per person means that you stay laser focused, then yes, do that. But I left it for way too long. So what I should have done is I should have said, keep the focus, whatever, and then add some shareholders in, because it doesn't matter if you own 90% of something that's worth much more than if you own 100% of it, right? That old adage. Yeah. So, I think it's a little combo of the both.
Cool. Now, we're going to go to the lightning round. We're going to ask some fun questions, some questions related to Geotab. I think we're going to put 2 minutes on the clock and try to get through as many as fast as possible. So, it's already started. When will we see truly autonomous vehicles on the road?
Autonomous vehicles are going to be much harder and longer than people think, because getting from 99.999% of accuracy to 99 point, adding another 2 nines on is 100 times more work than we've done in the past. So I'm not a fan of people who, Elon going, it's tomorrow, and it keeps on being tomorrow. But I want autonomous vehicles just as much as anybody else. So, I'm hopeful for the day, but it's going to be a little bit longer than we think, but more profound. It's always these things are more profound in the long run, but take longer in the short run.
A few governments are trying to compete with the US on GPS. Is anyone going to have a better navigation or better satellite system up there?
It's a little bit like first past the post, right? Once you're there, once you're established, once you're used everywhere, the fact that the US government keeps on investing and improving the satellites, making changes to it, frankly, at the end of the day, I think GPS is still the winner.
Great. Favorite team sport?
I play lately pickleball. I'm all over pickleball.
Favorite food?
I got celiac disease. So I can't have anything with gluten in it. But before that, pizza. I mean, what else is there? Pizzas and burgers. I hate to admit it.
Where's the best barbecue in the world?
Best barbecue in the world is South Africa. We make this most incredible sausage called boerewors, which is farmer sausage, and it's all beef, and it's
not sure if you're traveling yet, but assume we can leave these borders again sometime in the near future. Where would you like to travel to?
We went to China just before COVID hit. Hopefully, we weren't the ones bringing it back. But that was one of the most incredible trips. We wanted to go to Japan and see Japan because the culture and everything would just be awesome.
I'm going to try to sneak one more in. I know you try to read and research every day for an hour. Do you prefer user-generated content, books, or research reports?
I use Reddit. I choose my topics and I go through it, and I use Science Digest daily. I read a lot of research and science papers on that. And that really is the bulk of my reading. Couple of hours a day, at night, 10 o'clock in bed or whatever it is. Love it.
You're not on Wall Street Bets?
No.
I have a ton more questions. I think we could, as an ecosystem, we could learn a lot more from what you have done at Geotab. Thank you so much for your time. Maybe we'll have a follow-up conversation sometime soon.
Love to, Alex. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Neil.
That was awesome. Way to go, Alex. You have fun?
Thanks. Yeah. Look, I love someone that's built a massive business that makes a difference.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And a huge thank you for Neil for spending that time with us.